Everyone, good afternoon. I am so excited to be with everyone today because we have a really special panel discussion today where we are going to be talking about the ways in which Ayurveda intersects with the Enneagram. And so, what makes me really super excited for this class is the amazing panelists that we have for you, which you are your incredible teachers and guides here at Yoga Farm. We have Jaya, who has been um, my uh, my my partner as we have been exploring how to bring this to you and how to the best way to present this information to you. We have Jeannie, who is going to be amazing talking about all these things. We have Kim here as well, and we have Michelle. So I am so excited to be talking about this with you today. So the way that we're going to be doing this is we'll start. So I think the best way to do this is that we're going to actually go through the full Enneagram and then we'll leave the second half for questions. So what we'll do is Jaya will start with a brief description um, of the Enneagram type. Then we will open it to the panelists to talk about their ideas on that particular Enneagram type and the way that it intersects with Ayurveda and the different doshas and the different elements. As we go through it, we might get a chance to even talk about wings, talk about areas of stress, talk about areas of growth, talk about these different aspects that all go together. And then at the end, we will leave it open for an hour for questions. So your thoughts, your ideas, the ways in which you've seen it come for you in your life, and the ways in which the ideas have sparked as we've had this conversation. All right. Any questions? See check. It's like the Enneagram Avengers. I love that. That's awesome. All right. Yeah, Jaya, would you like to go ahead?
I did unmute. It worked. Okay. It told me I couldn't, and I wasn't. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with the absolutely amazing Yoga Farm instructors, all of whom I have profound respect and love for. And then Michelle, who's that now too, and who's coming in after me to teach the Enneagram. And I love Michelle. Okay, so y'all, let's start with Enneagram 8. That's where we always begin. The body types 8, 9, and 1 at the top of the Enneagram. So I'm going to give you a very quick run through, and then I'm going to let the others talk about. I know very little about Ayurveda, so I'm just giving you the basic thumbnail reminder of what Enneagram 8 means. So when we're at 8, I'm pretty sure we're in fire, we're in vitality. We're in, the 8 is very grounded as well. The 8 is solid in their body, fully embodied, fully vital, wanting to experience, participate, make shit happen. And the 8 is going to be relentless sometimes in going for what they want and making it happen. And, if things get in their way, they get frustrated and they get angry. The 8 is the most choleric type. Anger flares easily. And, but it also, then they're done with it and don't even notice that those around them are not done yet. 8 is powerful. 8 is the natural alpha. And I think I'm going to stop there. Those other parts, I'll just say the 8's journey is definitely an invitation to soften, to release, to let others lead, and to value others and their pace and their way of thinking instead of pushing them out of the way because you're in my way for what I'm going to make happen. That's it.
Thanks so much, Jaya. Yeah, Jeannie, Kim, would you like to talk a little bit about maybe what you saw there in terms of Enneagram elements, Ayurvedic elements, the way you've seen these present in your own lives and the lives of others?
What do you think, Jeannie? Should I? This is probably the only thing I can speak to on Enneagram. Because I am Enneagram 8. And while I haven't been able to get my head around Enneagram, that's why I was like, I don't know how much I can add here. What I can say is that I've spent my whole life learning how to balance my 8. So, 8, from what I understand, is going to be Pitta and will chakra. So when we're looking at the chakras and the doshas, we are looking at the will chakra, having will, strength, determination, truth, clarity, results, willpower, right? That's what the will chakra brings. And some of the disadvantages of that is that those of us Enneagram 8 who do not have a well-developed heart or sacral chakra we'll find ourselves bulldozing and creating carnage and not even noticing that we just bulldoze down everybody in line of the result we were going for. And that will create shame and blind spots within us because we don't want to be that way. We don't want to be narcissistic, which is, as you've all heard me teach, an imbalanced will chakra, excess pitta, can be really seen in that way. And so I think the growth trajectory for an 8, without understanding the wings completely, but from a will chakra and doshic perspective, is to establish a strong root, a strong grounding and safety, even if we don't get the results, and a deep connection to the sacral chakra, the connections with the people around us, as well as a development of the heart so that we can lead with the heart rather than the will chakra, which is with the ego is housed in the will chakra. So if we have strong will, we're going to have strong ego force, which in spirituality has become a bad thing, right? You're not supposed to have an ego, but you have to have enough ego to live in this human realm, to have a strong enough I, because those who have terribly weak will chakras will not have their truth or their desires, and their relationships will have a power imbalance often. That's
Yeah, and I'll build off of what Kim just said, in the sense that one of the greatest things that recognizing the pitta aspect, which would be my thought around eights, recognizing that pitta aspect and the fiery elements, when we're looking at it through the lens of Kundalini or meditations of all different types, breath work, we're really looking to deepen into heart center. So where eights and pitta can like come together in this different experience of balance and like subtle energy is by deepening into vulnerability and that heart-centered sharing. So those of us who, I mean, and I also want to say like eights, I feel so safe with eights. My best friend of 30 plus years is an 8. I don't know what would get done at Yoga Farm if it wasn't for Jessica. So we need those 8s. We need that pitta fire. And there's this element of longing to keep things safe and secure for those that they care about around them. So it's always there, that very heart-centered sweetness. And they can deepen into that and share a little bit more around their own vulnerability. And in regards to movement practice, there wants to be a really good balance for eights between vigorous movement and burning some of that fire so that it stays subtle and doesn't get like run amucky. And then also patience, stillness, slowing down the breathing. So for that type, it's always going to be a both and in a practice or in a class. If you're just like, I want to teach a body type class that has an emphasis on amped up pitta, then we're looking at move the pitta, then ground and center into stillness, and give them an opportunity to experience both of those things.
awesome. Thank you so much, Jeannie and Kim. That was beautiful. And I think actually with that, we will move on to the next type.
Okay, so that puts us at 9. So 9, oh my God, now that's funny. I was describing Kim's type. Now I'm describing Jeannie's type. And you know that so that that's a good place to remind you all that at different levels of growth, at different levels of development, people are going to look really different. So like a super unhealthy 8 was like my dad screaming and yelling and you know, but he was a provider. And then, you know, like Jess that Jeannie just discussed, Kim, examples of 8s that have become healthy. And so it's so again, so 9 too is going to look really different. So the issues of 9 are wanting things to be peaceful, wanting things to feel good, wanting things to be nice, to be kind. The 9, at the deepest level, the 9 is aware of the spiritual truth, we are all one, and it pains them deeply. All the chaos and lack of harmony. And so they dislike conflict very much. They dislike confrontation very much, to the point where they think that just saying, gee, I'd kind of like to do this, is a major confrontation. I mean, obviously, as they grow, that's not true anymore. The 9 wants to numb out what doesn't match peace. And so a lot of you know, when I think of 9s, I think of kapha, and I think of a often well, 9s are very solid people, and they can also, their numbing can take the form of numbing with food. Um, and they have a hard time getting the action, getting the body center involved, where like they care about things, the heart's there, they have ideas, they're smart, you know, they can think about things very clearly, but then getting that action, like, okay, well, I can't act yet. Oh, I'm not ready. They're famous for procrastination, things like that. So I'm just gonna stop there with those basics.
Jeannie, do you want to start with 9?
Feels a little bit like cheating. And yeah, I would jump right into the tendency for 9s to go to an imbalance of kapha really readily. And an element of it that can teeter also on spiritual bypassing. So, you know, if we think about an imbalanced 9's mindset, can be that kind of like, well, if I can't put my rose-colored glasses on in this scenario, and I can't bring my mind into a place of sweetness, then I'm going to run away to a place where there is sweetness, and it's like fantasy and not being in present moment reality in whatever way, shape, or form we can manage to do that. We, meaning 9's. I think that it's important as a body type and as a kapha tendency, that there's movement that goes on that also can engage in being vigorous. For a lot of you, we've been talking about the body types for a bit here, and I all day yesterday was really diving into the aspect that of the relationship that the body types have with anger. And whereas 8s can do it, move through it, burn through it really quickly, move on, 9s are like, never mind that. I'm going to pretend that's not happening. And it just kind of hangs out within the body. And so when we look at the physical body, you know, anger tends to kind of hang out in the neck and in the shoulders. And so from a Kundalini perspective, we want to do those really vigorous, you know, punching kind of martial arts moves that Kundalini has kind of woven in, to get energy moving and heart rate up, and to invigorate the body itself, but also to bring anger that has been suppressed up to the surface, and to give 9s an opportunity, and to give that kapha an opportunity to be with some fire, which will feel uncomfortable. Almost every single time it will feel uncomfortable. And that's kind of the ways that we get to approach it from like a yogic Ayurvedic perspective with the Enneagram awareness is noticing where we want to jump to sweetness, where we want to love and light our way into the next step. And remember that there's like an in-between of processing the heat, the pitta, the fire, the anger.
Again, not being an expert here, but speaking on the kapha qualities that Jeannie just said, and having a recent conversation with someone who identified their Enneagrams, I've seen nines being in that fantasy, which is a kaphic quality, the fantasy, and almost buying into the knight in shining armor or the princess movies a little bit too much, so to speak. There can be a tendency to find themselves, and so I'm just sanitizing because I have a lot of clients that I've worked with in an emotional affair with someone at work, or swept up in fantasy, in relationships, like an ideal of what the relationship. Correct me if I'm not speaking to this correctly for this Enneagram, Jeannie, but like swept up in the idea of what a marriage is supposed to be versus the reality of like how hard marriage is and what it takes to stay married for whatever many years, or to stay at a job, like an idea of what a job was, but the actual reality being hard about that job. So that fantasy can be really tricky in that kaphic element, because they can be always searching for this idealistic thing that doesn't match up with the hard reality of human suffering and relationship.
Kim, you're so spot on, and I want to add to that and say like it can create so if there isn't inner fire, and if there isn't an active cultivation of inner fire with excess kapha and the aspect of the nine, there is a seeking of that external fiery experience. So feeling unable to like bring the passion, the conflict, the heat, and only seeking those experiences and that sensation when it is a perceived good feeling sensation of passion and heat, and seeking, like outsourcing it constantly, like who's my fire, who's my fire, who's my fire, who's my fire, as opposed to being like where's my fire. And that's why like the kundalini practice for the nine wants to engage in building that inner subtle fire, not just so that emotions can be processed, but also so that there is this sense of like having empowerment for the nine, as opposed to abdicating, sovereignty and will for somebody else and seeking it from somebody else. So you're spot on. I mean, yeah.
So then the mental emotional work on that, what that we've seen is to develop negative mind. So there's positive mind, negative mind, and neutrality. And so for the nine, we actually have to develop negative mind on the affair or on the fantasy, because a lot of times when someone's dreaming, that's a positive mind projection into the future. And the development of negative mind on the future usually doesn't import into the fantasy. When we're fantasizing and dreaming, we're not thinking of all the things that could go wrong or feel bad in that fantasy. So on the mental layer of the body, it seems counterintuitive to bring in negativity, but the way that we counterbalance the fantasy of that nine or of that kaphic element is to ground it in the reality of the negative aspects or the negative consequences.
And I think too, this is the last thing, but it immediately brought me to a whole other layer that we're not going to involve with every single type. This is one of the reasons why it can also be so helpful to know your like tantric numerology, because having that, so thinking about the mind bodies, the negative mind, positive mind, neutral mind, from the 10 body perspective of Kundalini, it's highly likely that your soul number is going to land somewhere in one of those bodies. And people are going to have even more of a tendency to go to positive mind and be even more at risk. Fortunately, my soul is a negative mind. So I have some built-in balance to bring in that negativity and suspiciousness that I have of every situation. And if you don't have that 100%, it's so easy to like, and to even notice if it doesn't get as far as like an emotional affair with someone in your life, but having this, I'm going to call it the James Frazier fantasy, if anybody does the Outlander thing, where it's like, well, why isn't he like Jamie? Like, clearly there is an example of what to do and be. It doesn't seem that hard. So we'll go to the fantasy of not even real human beings and characters that we cling to as an ideal, and that isn't a real human. So just throwing that out there too.
So awesome. So exciting. And I am sorry to move us to the next Enneagram type, but I'm sure the conversation will continue to be just as amazing.
Okay, well, let's not be sorry. So we're finishing the body type and it's types. And so we're at one. So one is our reformer, and so in the anger thing, which Jeannie called out that I didn't say for 9, I did for 8. The one is can just be like this simmering frustration. They just want things to be good and right and done what they perceive to be the right way, the good way, the upstanding way. They can be very rigid and they can be very controlling. And the frustration is just, well, but wait, there's, it wasn't quite right, or we still need to fix this, or well, that's still off, or I didn't like that, or that's not okay. And so part of the journey of the one is to learn to accept shades of gray, that everything isn't black and white, all or nothing, and so on. And yeah, Michelle, will you just jump on, please, and add a little cream to the one? I know we can't spend much time on each type, but what have you got?
Perfectionism. That the one wants to be perfect, and in fact is the grief of the one, the place the one gets to is holy perfection. It's okay that I'm perfect, everything is perfect, and I don't have to, and therefore I'm not imperfect and I can relax. So there's a lot of rigidness in the one and a lot of self-criticism around not being perfect and therefore judging others.
Yeah, I'll just jump in with a little bit of an Ayurvedic perspective here, and then I'd love to hear from Jeannie and Kim as well. My mom is a type 1. So this is something that that brought me a lot of understanding and awareness when I realized she was a type 1. And so from an Ayurvedic perspective, I kind of really see two qualities. When I see a type 1, I see a lot of fire. There's a lot of willpower to get things done. When they see things as black and white, they want to do things on that side that they see are white. They want to do things on the right side, and there's a lot of fire that they bring to that to make sure things get done that way. On the other side, I also see a lot of imbalanced, out of balance kapha energy, and it comes across as a stubbornness, as an inability to do something that they do not see as right, that they do not see as building towards that perfectionism. And they get very entrenched and very stuck in that mindset. And it's very difficult to then move out of that mindset. So, kind of that kapha, water, earth stuckness that really need for like impetus and momentum and to really build, to really demonstrate to them, here is all the evidence that speaks to the fact that we can move in a different direction, is kind of where that comes into play for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was looking at your chart, Supriya, where you were like putting putting types into
Oh yeah, that was Jai's chart.
doshas.
That was
That's
Jai's
Guy's
chart.
chart.
Jai's
Guy's
chart.
chart.
Yeah.
Types into doshas, and I was like, oh, I don't know, man. I think the one has a lot of vata. Um, because I hear like underneath the stubborn, underneath the righteousness that can happen is fear. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety around not doing things right. Not and a lot of ones, at least the ones that I've seen in my life, including the one that I'm married to, um have all these really brilliant ideas about projects and then get swept up in the anxiety of them not being perfect, which goes back to what Michelle was saying. And then it's like an ADD situation, right? It's like I've got 6 things going on, but none of them are perfect, so I'm not going to finish any of them. And so I see, and I wonder what Kim is hearing in this, because I'm curious if this is like one actually has the closest tendency of being tridoshic, and then kind of depending on what is going on in their world, they get kicked out of balance relatively easy, which I would say is one of the Achilles heels of being tridoshic, is like it's a tentative balance. It might be a balance that they're all kind of there in the same amount, and the smallest thing can throw a little bit too much heat in, a little bit too much earth in, a little bit too much air in. But I see most of the ways that one expresses having this undercurrent of fear and worry, even to the point where, again, the body types and their relationship to anger, um, ones like to pretend that they're not angry because they're worried about how they will be perceived if they do anger wrong, which again goes back to fear. Like, oh, I can't even do anger right, so why bother? Ones seek certainty, which is impossible. And if they don't have the certainty, they tend to be all over the place. And so they can really benefit from like a consistent practice that keeps things in balance, a good combination of movement and stillness, similar to the 8, and maybe even erring on the side of a little bit more pranayama, a little bit more breath practice, so that they can get deeper into their breathing, deeper into an embodied ability to shift energies, and an awareness that they have that empowerment.
That's really insightful, Jeannie. So I have the gift of my best friend is a 1, and she's really into Enneagram. So I'm pretty certain she's probably correct that she's a 1, because she is also a tenured professor of education. And I think that embodies a lot of oneness. I had always seen her as Pitta Kapha. She's my best friend. She's stable, she's strong, she's ethical. She has really stood for special ed and teacher resilience, and she's bringing that work out in the world. So that's her energy that she brings. We've always debated whether she's tridoshic or not, but she looks Pitta Kapha. So she's steady, solid, but there is this part of her, and I think what you're naming, Jeannie, is Pitta anxiety. So if you guys remember, we looked at tamas on and each of the emotions on the different doshas. And I think what you're naming with Matt is perfectionism and hitting a freeze response. And that freeze response almost looks vata, but it's vata on the mental and emotional layer of the body. That might be because the perfectionism is in like a pitta can't compute. I might as well go eat donuts, kind of thing. So that's what I think can go on, is that freeze response from the perfectionism, which is a pitta type of anxiety. But I have seen some vata imbalance in her as well. So it's a really cool discussion about what Pitta Kapha. I always thought it was Pitta Kapha with a little vata imbalance is how I've always named it. But their gifts are they do things well, and they're like the Energizer bunny. They can keep going and going and going until they hit a wall. And once they hit a wall, like Tridoshic, everything goes out of balance and their world almost falls apart in that way. And that's very much like that Pitta Kapha water element. It's like build, 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 build until it crashes. I agree completely in what you say. And the element, so we always want to look at the elements. So if it's Pitta and Kapha, we need more air. We need more meditation. We need more trust in the divine. We need more spiritual aspect into that Pitta Kapha. And if we just backtrack, if 8s are lions and 9s are bears, 1s I think are like horses or rhinoceros, that kind of energy, if we're going to put an animal to it. Or like a mule that can just keep going.
That's awesome. Rhinoceros or horse, like that image is just sticking with me so much right now. I love it.
I think I would
Giant.
have picked elephant, but that could just be because I love elephants so much.
I was gonna say elephant because they're strong and they're sensitive. They're so intuitive and they mourn over their right. Like so, there's that emotional piece. And in fact, this friend likes to keep emotion at bay. So the irony is that like she feels so sensitive to people's emotion, she has to put a lot of boundaries in place so she's not dealing with so many emotions. And I think the kapha element feels burdened. Burden is a big word for kaphas. They feel burdened by other people's emotions very often.
I
So
I also love the elephant, Jeannie. My mom would love the elephant. Elephants are very family oriented. They stay with their young for a very long time. I think till they're 50 years old, till the child is 50 years old.
They're
And so that kind
grandmothers.
of and so that kind of kapha family oriented, caring for the ones that you love, really comes through with the elephant. And one of the reasons that my mom loves the elephant so much.
So we are running into the heart types. We time, y'all. So I'm being very brief. I am loving how other people are filling in whatever I leave out. It's perfect. Michelle, I liked what I did last time. So heads up, I'm going to keep doing that. Just let you have a word after me to just fill in some Enneagram stuff before everyone else takes off with Ayurveda. And then Jeannie is our miracle of knows it all. Not in the bad way. Okay, now she's going to be modest, but anyway, knows so much about all of it. How's that? Okay, 2, our first heart type, that is our helper. It's the one I think of as the mama of the Enneagram. I personally think we have as many genders as we have human beings. So whatever the gender, the 2's the mama. They want to love, they want to serve, they want to take care of, they want to nurture, they want to nourish, they want to be there for you, and so what they want, and this shifts over time and over getting more present and more healthy, is the confirmation from you that, oh my God, you get me, oh my God, you see me, oh my God, it has to be you. You're the only one who really, whatever, whatever, whatever. You were there right when I needed you, et cetera, et cetera. But the 2 exhaust themselves and they don't have a no when someone says either I'm in need or you're the one. So 2 ends up depleted and resentful, and they can have their the lines where 2 goes to 8, they can have their explosive moments in stress where I've given and given and given, and why aren't you giving to me? And why aren't you showing up the way I am? Instead of understanding that actually they need to take a page from everyone else and show up less, like according to actual capacity. So I'm going to stop there and Michelle, see what you want to add. I didn't talk about shame at all, but whatever you've got. We can't hear you. You got on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what the first thing I was going to add is that we're entering into the shame triad and that feeling of not being good enough. And the love, actually, before I go down that, the points are located, the energy from the point is located at a different place in the body. The the energy is in the heart center, but it's at the front of the heart center. The 3, the energy is at the center of the heart center, and the 4 is at the back of the heart center. And so the 2's energy leading from it grabs you, it holds you, it wants you to love it, it wants, and I guess that's what I would add to it. And then the shame of, and the 2 feels like love is required to be given, to be loved, to get love in return. But then when it doesn't get returned, a lot of resentment and shame is what comes up in the 2. I think it's kapha, very holding energy.
Yeah, and I want to go back to what Kim was just saying about this sense of kapha and burden. And 2's out of balance, add kapha into the mix, and there is this martyrdom, bitterness, resentment that can set in. And from a Kundalini perspective, when we're kind of putting these things together and looking at like what is the counter, what is the antidote so that we can come back into equanimity and balance, it's that it pings on what Michelle said, that there's this longing to receive, however, believing that you have to exhaust yourself to be worthy of receiving, and an underlying fear of not belonging. So that my belonging is contingent, 2's belonging is contingent. A kapha's belonging is also contingent on how we can show up for others, how we can carry the load. And then if it isn't in reciprocity, not only does it feel burdensome, we go to martyrdom, it also has that feeling of like, see, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm not actually going to belong here. I'm not actually going to belong there, so, and what's important to remember with 2's is 2's can have extreme reactions to their imbalanced energy in their body and in their prana maya kosha. So there's often like a lot of prana, a lot of uplifting energy, and they're in their doership of like, show up, do the volunteering, bake the cupcakes, pick up the kids, do this, volunteer for every committee, help, 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 help. Or they're way down in apana, that grounding wind, and they feel stuck and they feel burdened again, right? So practices that enable 2's to have a balance of prana apana and to be able to reside in that 3rd chakra is really supportive to them, so that they don't succumb to the kapha and they also don't go until they burn out.
I'm just sitting here like recapitulating a number of people now that I've identified, and I teach this, like that the kapha element usually has a strong sacral, but there was always a question within me that like some kaphas have this caretaker role and look as if they have a lot of sacral energy, but there's a deep resentment or feel entitlement is the word. Entitlement for it to be done. And they're like paying it forward with an expectation and an entitlement that you can feel, and it tends to build. So it looks like a lot of sacral and loving, but there's an expectation behind it. So it feels a little yucky because the giving is burdened with something behind the giving. So I always tried to explain that through the sacral, but there was a piece of like needing to belong, but did they belong? But they're doing all these things to belong, but it feels like there's a trauma packet in there around belonging because it's not aligned within itself. So Jeannie, thank you for adding that, because I just like saw all the clients where I hit that and I was like, oh, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, it's root chakra. I mean, it comes from a hunger, like a hungry lack of security, lack of like total scarcity mindset, and then it's overcompensation for that. So
It's a
like
fawn response from a nervous system perspective.
totally,
It's a
totally.
fawn response, and anyone who's in a fawn response is not able to act out of really the heart of love. It's coming from a deep deficiency, and it's a fawning, people pleasing, which is not. I mean, it looks heart-based, but it doesn't feel that way because it's a survival response.
A speculation of the childhood message of the childhood of the two is that the two had to caregive the caregiver, which would lead to that.
100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if we take trauma into each of these scenarios, how fascinating would that be if we put that layer on it?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And we're going to 3 now, Supriya. Okay, so 3. That's our achiever, our performer. 3 is very animated. 3 loves to get shit done. 3 uh, wants things to be good, but they don't need it to be perfect. Like they want it to look really good. They want it to be impressive. They want it to win the prize, and they'll take the shortcuts they need to take to get there. They'll break the rules or follow the rules, whatever serves them. 3 can bother people with their sort of self-broadcasting, like, but you know, they are our model of stand in your glory and let people know that you're big, bad, and beautiful. And they but so an unhealthy 3 will do a little bit too much of or a lot of tooting their own horn, name dropping, etc. But and they can get very confused by the to-do list that is the point of life, that they are a success if they did that. The problem is with each thing they complete, each thing they win, each thing they create, that's amazing and beautiful. They hardly take the time to actually love it. I mean, they'll tell someone about it, or they'll put it on their resume or wherever, you know, on a plaque where that people can see, or they'll say yes to the interview, but they won't really celebrate it. They won't really relish it. They're not really enjoying the journey because they're just getting shit done, winning, making it happen. And I'm going to stop there and let you add, Michelle.
I like to think about the points of the Enneagram in terms of first what the gift of each point is. And the gift at point 3 is sort of the self-expression, the look what I can be. And inside the energy from the 3 comes from the heart, and look what I can do. Look what I can do. And also gets the stuff done, because society, as human beings, we need to get things done, and the 3 gets things done. But inside, it doesn't. There's a disconnection from the heart and emotion, and emotions are blocked off. So in the case, it's the 3 is in the heart center, but there's an emptiness right there in the center of the heart that the 3 is trying to get in touch with to become whole.
Yeah, this is a whole lot of pitta going on in the 3. Lots of pitta, lots of action, lots of movement. I think that from a practice perspective, 3s struggle the most, and that pitta aspect struggles the most with like thinking about spirituality even as this achievement that they can be seen as being the best at doing the yoga, doing the practice, being enlightened, whatever it is. And 3s can also have a tendency to practice jump, where they're kind of like, I'm going to dip into doing anything a little bit as long as I'm getting positive recognition for it, and then they'll pop back out of it if they don't feel like they're getting it. There's still that heart type experience of I probably don't actually belong, and this fear of not belonging. And the ways that 3 does it in a dance with pitta is actually through conformity. And it sounds weird because like 3s want to be the best, but they want to belong as the best. So if they are at a park and people are playing, this is a silly example, people are playing kickball, they're going to go play kickball, and kickball is going to be their identity as long as they're the best at it. And in the second that they don't get to be the best, then they're going to notice people are playing tennis. And then they're going to go, tennis is going to become their personality. So there's this, instead of inherent belonging, I belong where I am, or I can be my individual self and still belong. There's this kind of a chameleon, and the pitta gives them enough fire to be able to have 65 hobbies, and maybe just like pop around within the energy. So when we're looking at it from a practice perspective, we want them to have the uncomfortable experience of consistency and actually not being the best, because it's yoga and you can't be.
I wonder if that's a little vata, pitta vata, Jeannie. What do you think? Because the changing nature that you're describing, and the chameleon to the hobbies, that changing nature sounds vata, and it sounds like a throat chakra imbalance in the vata of, I'll change who I am in order to be to matter, to be seen in a way where I matter, because of a weak sacral element. And when we're vata pitta, the energy is more up here, and what you're describing in the heart. So I do wonder what do you think about that? Do you think it's pitta dosha with some vata? I know someone who's hitting the vata stage of life. So I think there are 3, but as they move into vata stage, they appeared as a pitta, but I'm actually wondering if there was more vata there that was masked as pitta.
Oh, that's something. Yeah, I think you're on something. I think I would still do pitta dominant for 3s because of that, like, things get done because 3s really do get stuff done.
Yeah.
And then the vata comes in when it's like, oh, I can't actually, like, the changeability of it is when they feel like they can't be the best, or when they feel like they have gotten the most that they can, the most recognition. I have won the trophy, I have won the tournament, moving on, because now I have to go be the best at something else to be recognized. So it's that same aspect of like external validation and not having a whole lot of internal resonance with who they are, and a deep fear when we talk about trauma and wounds of not fitting in. I'm not going to fit in. I can't fit in. I'm somehow going to be abandoned because people are going to see that I'm not as good as I should be.
Right, which is why failure feels like death, I think, for this type, because the failure is the piece that what Michelle just said about shame, like, hit me like, oh, the shame, and then the failure, because failure kills the identity, and they don't know who they are in the face of failure, and they might have to change then as well. And either they rose to the top or they failed, and therefore need to change their external circumstances. Wow.
Time for 4. Okay. So we're closing out the hard types here with 4. So the shame is least evident in the 3 that we just talked about, because shame doesn't go well with the appearance of being polished and together and the winner that they cultivate. Whereas for the 4, it's going to be more evident. But the 4 is the most watery, the most deeply sensitive, the most deeply pained by what's not okay in life, and they're focused on what's not okay in life. That's our type who's focused on what's, the glass half empty. The 4 is very moody. The 4, that can change over time. It all can change over time. The 4 wants to express, and that can mean anything from just complaining or like telling all about the details of what's hard in their life or what's not okay, or it can mean expressing through art. And part of what the 4 does is get redemption through art, that through in a creative way they express what all of humanity feels, and sometimes the sorrow and pathos and whatever, but also the beauty and the playfulness and whatever's there. I just have so much to say, and this is so good for me. I'm just going to discipline myself and stop right there and let Michelle fill in a few other key points.
The light of the 4 is to feel, right at the bottom of the Enneagram. The 5 is thinks, is the thinker in us. The 4 is the feeler in us. And, to heal, you have to feel. You have to feel your feelings to know who you are. And so there's a essence of beauty in what the 4 is all about, and kind of understanding it. And the 4 is constantly looking at the world, and people are saying things are one. The 4 is looking at it and saying, you know what? That's not even true. There's a kind of a clarity around the 4, and a heartbreak around the fact that people are lying to ourselves and not seeing what's actually going on, and like deep in the grief of that, the experience of that. And why can't you see? And why can't you feel that? That's how I see it anyway. And the 4's energy is at the back of the heart center, self-indulgent in the experience of emotion.
My experience with 4s is, from an Ayurvedic perspective, is that when they can have balanced, subtle, light connection with their vata, they are the most nourished and the most fulfilled. So this consistent expression of themselves creatively, to be able to tap into their direct connection to inspiration and breath, and the ways that more unseen esoteric things that might feel out of reach and complicated to other types tend to drop in for them really easily. So they just need an outlet for that vata to have a place to go, and they can use that energy for a lot of creativity. I think that what is tricky from an Ayurvedic perspective about the vata 4 connection is that they kind of bypass their mind. I mean, talk about like how back to what we were saying about the 9. I think this is one of the reasons why 9s and 4s kind of, people don't know which one they are a lot of times. It's that like they're, how do I put this? Like they're not quite able to feel like they're articulating their experience and that they're being heard and seen for what they know. And they bypass the mental body completely. Like we're not going to go into logic. That's boring and excruciating. We're going to stay in the feeling, and then we can go into the body. Like we can go to 1. So we can go into the body. And there's so much of that, back and forth, I think, for 4s. And that one of the things that they can really benefit from is consistency of practice. And also something that asks them to question their default mechanisms, question their habits, right? So the most balanced 4s that I've known in my experience have been the ones that are really good at self-witnessing and then not believing their own stories, right?
Okay, someone asked what animal the 3 was, and I would pin that as a bobcat or like a jaguar, like a fiery feline, is where I'd go if I'm getting 3 correct, whereas 4 sounds like a bird. And so straight up Vata bird, and a lot of the things you said, I loved how you said this, Jeannie, but a 9 is Kaphic and a 4 is Vata, and what they both lack is fire. So the lack of fire often gets confused. We see this when people are filling out dosha forms. Like a Vata might identify themselves as a Kapha or vice versa, not understanding there's a very physical aspect to the doshas, but what they're identifying is lack of fire. And that's the similarity. So what you just mentioned, I will say again, building the negative mind. So the bypassing happens when there's not a solid enough will chakra that's poking holes. Like the 8, where I'm poking holes at I'm working with a contractor in my backyard. Here's what can go wrong. Here's what can go wrong. Here's what could go wrong. Like fire has negative mind, whereas a lack of fire may be living in fantasy, but a differently derived fantasy, but a lack of negative mind due to a lack of fire and will chakra and strategy in the mental body, as Jeannie just said, because the mental body, the ego, is housed in the will chakra. So if you don't have much of a will chakra, you're finding alternative routes around finding your truth and making decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, it's different fantasies too that the 4 and the 9 go to, but it's still that escapism that can happen. You know, like the 9 is looking out the window and seeing that everything else that's out there is you know, bright and sunshiny, and you know, they just have to, they have to figure out how to have access to that. And the 4 is looking out the window and it's like, you know, it's raining and a Sarah McLachlan song is playing, and it's beautiful and it's emotional, and so it feels, it feels, which feeling just feels good regardless of what the feels are. So it's a different fantasy that's playing out, and I 100% agree about that, like negative mind, and the negative mind of questioning the thoughts, like, is this true for the 4? Is this actually what is going on? Am I in the middle of a stray dog Sarah McLachlan commercial, or could there be something else in my day today?
Ingrid Michaelson, maybe even.
There's also quality of envy in the two, that the fantasy is related to the 4. I'm sorry, the 4. Thank you. That the fantasy is related to how I can be more like, or why am I not like someone else?
So powerlessness is what I can hear the powerlessness in that.
Yeah.
And again, not fitting in, not belonging. That wound is just, the heart types go in that place. Yeah.
I would love to just chime in that one interesting difference between the fantasizing of the 9 and the 4 is the 9 is fantasizing to feel good. The 9 is fantasizing to be in their bubble. And the 4 is fantasizing to amplify whatever emotion they have going. So it could be a beautiful, a good, a romantic fantasy, or it could be just agonizing over, like, you're seeing your kid's funeral, you're going back over every painful thing that's ever happened to you. That's how that works. And we better go to 5. Yes, Supriya? Okay. This is, I'm having so much fun. I hope everybody is. Fascinating to hear everyone talk. Okay, let's start the head types with 5, our talking head of the Enneagram. So the 5 is the headiest of the heads. They shield the heart, they disconnect from the body, and they just treat the head as the answer for everything. So they're going to logic it, research it, think about it, read about it, and work everything out in the head. And they are the most withdrawn of the 2 withdrawn types. But it is interesting, Michelle pointed out where 4 and 5 exist on the diagram, and the 4 and the 5 are both dangling down at the bottom. They're like the ones voted most likely to just fall off the human race entirely, the human race. So the 5 is really holds their energy in more than any other type, whereas the 8 is like, They could just be standing quietly and they are exuding their energy. And the 5 is just with the most pulled in, the most withdrawn, and they do literally withdraw. Like they go away, and not like 9 to create a nice bubble, or not like 4 to go feel everything, but 5s withdraw to just everybody get the fuck away from me, and y'all are crazy and I don't want anything to do with it. I'm barricading myself and I'm just gonna think now and read and just be rational, logical, etc. So I'll stop there and let you finish, Michelle.
I think of the 5 again, the light, the gift, the 5 to think, to figure things out, to understand how all this works that we live in. And I think it's a 5 as a curmudgeon, get off my grass, leave me alone. I'm perfectly fine where I am. I just want to be lost in my world, figuring stuff out. And a 5 would want to know in a class that you know what you're doing, to take you seriously. And maybe it's not worth the time to bother with you if and so anyway, the 5 is like retreating from, it is wants to stay safe and has found a place to be safe in thinking about things.
Yeah, I think that this was another one of the things on the chart where I was like, disagree with this chart. I think that the 5 is the kapha of the mind types, the most kapha of the mind types. Steadiness, stubborn, withdrawn, in the capacity of their physical body. They are very comfortable with stillness and steadiness, and they don't want too much disruption. They don't want too much disruption, and change itself for a 5 can feel really overwhelming. So there's that steadiness that is present. 5s can also in a very kapha way, like become hyper focused and fixated on something, and they're going to stick with it until they figure it out. They there is, I think this is why when 5s are in their security and their growth, they go to 8. So they have access to fire. It's not like they don't, and they would need that to stay steady. And looking at the 3 mind types, I think that 5 is very, very kapha, and it can benefit from invoking the fire within them. And when there is a balance of that fire within them, that's when they're really, just lit up on a topic. They're the expert. They're communicating, they're sharing what they know as opposed to hoarding what they know. 5s can have that tendency of hoarding, of stuff, of energy, of space. It's not just the curmudgeon, get off my lawn. It's like, well, all my stuff is in here and I want it and I care. It's a little dragony, but like sleepy dragon, like this is all my gold and I'm in my mountain. Piss off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there 5s in Yoga Farm? Do we know any 5s?
5s who are working for Yoga Farm. Zara is a 5. She's a very balanced 5 and has a lot of access to her fire, and she knows that she has to stay active and stretch outside her comfort zone, or she can get very like heady. But if you've ever listened to her talk about anatomy, you can see where her 5 mind goes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. I have nothing to add here except for the fact that it does sound like there's pitta there, and it does sound like it's high mental body pitta. I'm sorry, Michelle, did you want to say something? And I guess what I'm trying on is it feels like there's dryness in it, like a mental body fire and dryness. So yeah, fascinating.
What's the dryness?
the sharpness. I guess maybe it's the pitta sharpness. There's a sharpness there that Jeannie was just describing. Mercurial.
Because they do go to 8 in growth. So when they're, when they're secure, when they're in that aspect of, they can activate the pitta, be in that space, have the sharpness. Fives, I think it's important to mention their almost addiction to, at times, aloneness.
Yeah.
They love alone time. Like they are the spokesperson, the Enneagram of introvert. Absolutely. They are perfectly content. And if they don't get adequate alone time, can become very agitated and very dysregulated.
I would just
What animal is it? I'm sorry, Supriya.
Oh, I was just going to add that I think that fives really benefit from adding more of that air quality to them, from adding more of that vata air ether quality, for mixing things up, not pushing them too far out of their comfort zone too soon, but for mixing things up, for trying new activities, for saying that I'm not just always going to be introverted, but let me see what else is out there to enjoy life.
Well, and to play. Like the fives need access to play. So fives have access to the mental tri-type and the body tri-type. They have nearly no access to the heart. Like they don't go there in stress or growth. So the heart feelingness and the vata creativity and emotionality and like letting things move is really, really hard for them. And they can be very uncomfortable with emotion unless they can contextualize it and categorize it and put it in a neat little box with a bow on the top and be like, somebody put in the chat, I have to schedule when it's time to feel my feelings and then I reschedule. Right. So yeah. All of that. And I think somebody asked like what a social 5 would look like. And my experience with that is the person who comes in and kind of like assesses the needs of a group, but keeps everybody at arm's length, right? So they can go into their social, but it's from that aspect of like, okay, I'm here. I did what you told me to do. Don't get too close or try to touch me. And also, make sure that you go get more ice because there's not enough ice for everybody at this party, right? So they'll go to like, how can I mentally be useful in this social space? How can my mind step in?
Well, one more way the social 5 can present it, that was brilliant, Jeannie, and is the groups I like are my cronies. I like Stephen Mitchell is a 5, and like he hangs out with other Buddhists, and he doesn't write book blurbs for anyone except his Zen Buddhist dudes, and that's what they do. Yeah. So the social gets very directed to like where I'm intellectually happy, in my happy place. Also I went about dryness, the heart of the 5 is very dry because Russ Hudson has named the heart of each type, the suffering heart of each type. And so for the 5, it's like the desiccated or the desert heart, and that's hoarding, like they hoard their heart away too, so they don't allow nourishment to come in. Shall I go to 6, Supriya, or okay. All right, so 6, we've got 2 more head types. 6 is our the head types deal with fear, and the 5 is mostly scared of the crazy and bit of other stuff. Anyway, they're scared everybody's so stupid that lots could go wrong. So the six is the most overtly fearful of the fear types, and the one who really needs to develop a relationship with anxiety, like because they have it and they're going to deal with it. It will be a lifelong project. So they need to learn how to take care of their anxious self. So we're in the head types, and it's like the earth element where they actually in the five let me bring in another tradition. Okay, I won't say much about that, but they literally talk about like the mind is what makes you feel you're not okay and your needs aren't going to be met and things are going to go wrong and everything isn't safe, and the six is just the poster child of looking ahead to what could go wrong. Kim had mentioned that earlier, talking about one of the doshas. So six is but they're so aware. So they're looking, they see everything, they see the whole, they see the parts, they see how to fit themselves in. They're the marriage of nine, who kind of can witness everything and know the unity, and three, who wants to be themselves in that picture. And then six is doing all of that. Like, I see the whole, I see the parts, I see where I fit in, and I get in there and do what I can. And it's usually going to be organized around the team, keeping everyone safe, things like that. So I'll let Michelle finish with key 6 points.
The six is often, the loyalist, the skeptic, the fear is driven by the scary things are going to happen. And going back to the gift of that point and what that point is about. And this is an area that Russ Hudson taught differently in the Nine Gateways course than he had ever taught it before. And he described it as attention. Is that aspect of ourselves. We're going out in the world and we need to be aware of everything that's going on around us and monitoring and making sure that we're safe. Of course, what we do is we take our gifts and we wrap ourselves around until all we're doing is constantly. And the journey of the six is to get to holy guidance that the God, the universe has us, that you're safe. All you have to do is tap into that inner guidance. But until the six gets there, the journey is the sort of the frenetic, something's going to go wrong, and I have to make sure that the thing doesn't go wrong.
Yeah, total hypervigilance. I'm just seeing fire in the chat. Like, that is how I would describe sixes and their excess, anxious, vata, prana uplifted, constantly kind of swirling in the danger zone. It's like, where is the danger? Where is the danger now? Where is the danger now? And then almost like beyond a step of hypervigilance, a hyper awareness of the ways that things should be. And then when things aren't that way, almost like going into analysis paralysis. It's almost like a record scratch. My father-in-law is a six. And when we were in Iowa, Matt made him a cup of tea. Favorite story. It's such a six story. And so Matt brings his dad the cup of tea, and my father-in-law takes the tea and looks at it and goes, for a solid 3 minutes, we were like, what's wrong with the tea? We're like, is everything okay? Finally, I was like, Dad, what's going on? He's like, well, when you make tea, you put the tea bag in the tea and you let it steep for 5 minutes, and then you take the tea bag out and you throw it away. So he couldn't get over the fact that there was a tea bag in his teacup. And he's like, the tea is going to get too strong, or should I drink it now? I don't, like, his brain literally melted in that moment, because he was just like, and I'm using like an innocuous example, but like, it is ultimately the hypervigilance of something isn't right here. And there could be consequences to this lack of rightness here. So I see so much imbalanced vata in a lot of sixes, and that, almost needing to intentionally bring them into their sympathetic nervous system so that they can have an embodied feeling of being in their sympathetic, and then bringing them back into their parasympathetic and giving them, from a Kundalini perspective, it's like you want sixes to bounce back and forth between that, so that the next time their nervous system gets hijacked because somebody hands them an improper cup of tea, they can be like, I can recover from this. Because it can be the like, well, now there's no, like, how do we fix? How do we change? How do we shift? And the analysis paralysis comes in and they just get so overwhelmed.
What do you think about, I think when we are working with folks, we go to mantra too, because what you're describing is duality on the mental body. There's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And there's an overfixation on that at some point we want them to surrender and just let go and go into the spiritual. So I'm guessing surrender is a part of the 6 type. And in that surrender, I always say, at the Waldorf school, they'll have even toddlers cutting carrots, or whatever, but like just keeping them busy. So mantra is a mind protection. And so for this type of situation, we'll typically redirect the client into a more productive activity for, there we go. Someone tattooed surrender, 6 tattooed surrender. So we'll have them, just practice mantra. Like when your mind starts to, we'll call it ruminate. When your mind starts to ruminate, go to mantra. Just take on a mantra, because mantra will then work. It's a thing that will keep the head busy, and it will work on the chakras of the body through seed sounds.
Yeah, I would add that mantra for all 3 of the mind types is really, really soothing and recalibrating. I mean, mantra is just ubiquitously helpful, and for the mind types in specifics, as far as designing a class or a workshop, don't skimp out on the mantra.
Seven? Okay. So here we've gone all the way around the Enneagram. Now we're at 7. So this is the most the one of the head types where fear and anxiety are least apparent, but they're there. So the 7, what they present is lightness and fun and sunshininess, but they want to have fun. But the thing about the 7 is they're just deeply participatory. Like they want to get in there, they want to experience stuff, they want to go places, they want to do things. They're often called the adventurer or the enthusiast, and they love life and they're happy people by and large. But they also typically in childhood were expected to contribute that vibe, and stuff was shut down if it didn't match that. The 7 is really good at getting their needs met, and where 6 did that hypervigilance, like for everything that could possibly go wrong, and 5 needs to just think about everything. For the 7, it's like I want to know a lot of options. I want to know a lot of cool stuff happening. I want to learn what's interesting to me. I want to go places that are cool, and they rob themselves of presence by looking ahead a lot at the next shiny object. They're very, very active and busy. Michelle, what you got?
What I would add to that is that the substrate of a 7 is gratefulness. It's the gift at the point is to experience the rapture of being alive in full measure, but it's an escape. There's a deep hunger that all of that experience is seeking to fill up, and the journey of the 7 is to settle into presence and recognize, sort of the infinity, that the eternity that's here in the present moment, and all the gifts that are right here, right now.
Yeah, I think that 7s lean heavily in the Pitta department, not just because of their like sunshiny, warm, joyful dispositions, but because of their perpetual motion. So in regards to the mind types, like they're the energizer bunnies of of that type. They can go and go and go and go, and they love that, actually. Whereas restriction, routine, planning, can almost be just such excruciating boredom, and a feeling of just like rain coming down on their happiness parade. To talk about something that happens every year in Ithaca, well, outside of Ithaca at Grassroots, there's a happiness parade. Every time I see it happen, I'm like, this is just sevens made this up. A group of sevens got together and were like, you know what this music festival needs? A happiness parade with costumes for no reason. um it's it's that kind of energy. And so when working with sevens, typically, again, similar to a nine's experience, anything that is uncomfortable or not full of joy wants to be bypassed. And they will do it by keeping it moving. Let's just keep it moving, as opposed to, I feel sad, I feel rejected, I feel overwhelmed, I feel angry, I feel bitter. All of that gets swept to the side because they don't want to give themselves even the time to be present with those perceived negative emotions. Yeah.
There's another, I think I happen to be tridoshic, and I don't know if that's typical, but my imbalance tends to go towards vata, anxiety, and racing. And one of the characteristics of the seven is the ability to reframe problems. I don't know if anybody's a Trekker, Star Trek here, but the Kobayashi Marie, he reprograms. It's the no-win situation that all the officers have to take, and how do they face the character? And the seven reprograms the test. It doesn't, and that's kind of a big feature of the show, and that's what the seven does. The seven reprograms the test.
I would just also say, yeah, going with what you're saying, Michelle. I think also, Jeannie, I agree with you that there's a lot of pitta, there's a lot of fire to do the things, but there's also a lot of vata energy. They're always flitting back and forth. They're always going after the new shiny thing. I'm a seven, so always going after the new shiny thing. Always need to be in motion, right? Always need to be in motion. That's movement. That's vata. That's air energy. Always having a lot of energy. Always bringing a lot of energies. That's a lot of vata. That kind of vata of joy, that vata need to explore, not liking to be in a box, not liking to be constrained by anything. Vata doesn't like structure. Vata does really well with structure, but it doesn't like it. It doesn't like to be constrained. It wants to be free to do whatever it wants to do. So I definitely see a lot of vata energy, similar to what you're saying, Michelle, a lot of vata energy in the seven, as well as that pitta energy.
I think we just got through the whole Enneagram.
Yeah. So I would love to open it up to questions. What questions does everybody have? And our six vatas, I could definitely see that, yeah, and a lot of that hypervigilance, a lot of that anxiety, that is a lot of imbalanced vata energy, that kind of looping thoughts, that anxiety, that hypervigilance. It stems from a lack of kapha energy, stems from a lack of grounding, stems from a lack of security, and that then leads to overindulgence in the vata energy. Denise, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is amazing. Thank you so much to have this whole panel here. I'm doing a workshop in August on Wednesdays, 4 weeks on the Enneagram and the doshas. So this is like huge to help me. Yeah, this is amazing. My question is, I know I'm a 9. I believe with an 8 wing, but I think I might work with Jai a little on that to see. But I also relate so much to a lot of others that are like, oh yeah, that's me, or it was me, So what do you speak to that? Yeah, I just don't feel like I'm one,
I don't have an answer to this, but Denise, having been with you in office hours, I would have anticipated you were more Pitta or Vata, and we've identified nines as more Kaphic. So I just want to place that data point there, having not
Yeah.
just blow open everything that we've just talked about.
And I do feel I'm Vata Pitta with a little Kapha, but okay, so there you go. I have to go back to the, yeah.
I'm not going
Jeannie,
to say anything because I know Denise really well, and Jai says I have to stop typing people. I'm not going to get in trouble on the panel today. And I'm going to say, Denise, you're going to go back and take that test again. And you're going to take it as like, you know, think about like your most balanced, authentic self, not who you think you were supposed to be,
Mhm.
but or who you want to be, but who you are in the context of if you're not trying to fit other people's expectations of you. And I think that you've spent a lot of time in life trying to meet other people's expectations of you. And so that might have skewed some of the answers that you had. And
That's great.
all I'm going to say about that.
But I know what you said you think I am, but it's fine. Yeah, I'll definitely take that in. Thank you.
There's a couple of other ways you can explore that too. One is look at the wings that the type goes to, and do those make sense? But there's another layer below this, the 9 types. There are actually 27 types if you bring into the body instincts. I mistyped myself until I brought in the body instincts. I thought I was a 2. And then when I brought in the body instincts, in every one of the types, there's a counter type with one of the body instincts. It doesn't show up exactly like the other types. So that's another place of exploration in the wisdom of the Enneagram, to look at the instinctual section of that book of what the type is, to see if that nails it better.
And can we just take this moment to remind everybody that the test cannot type you, it can just point you to good directions for exploration. And I really love how Jeannie talked about a way to take the test. But it's really your explorations of understanding the type and self-witnessing so that you can match what you're learning about the types to what you observe in yourself and what you see as your key issues and things like that. Jeannie, would you agree that, and Michelle, that of all the types, the one who's most likely to be like, oh, I might be that, I might be that, I might be that, it would be a 9, like
Yeah, I think that the 9 is the most frequently mistyped, I guess, is how I've encountered it. And also the 2, probably also for femme people, because a lot of the attributes of those 2 types are culturally ingrained in us that is the way to behave. And we get positive feedback by acting like a 2 or acting like a 9, but that doesn't necessarily even mean that we are that type without that cultural conditioning. So, so yeah, I would agree. I think that there is that aspect of, I don't know how to put this. Of like, if you read a type and you're like, oh, that would be great, I want to be that type, that's probably not your type.
Right.
If you're like, oh, I love that type, I love the name of that type, I love how that type sounds, that sounds like a great idea, highly likely not your type. Highly likely, because it will resonate with such truth. And being perceived, at least this is how I experienced it, is like all of a sudden I was being perceived as my true self, and it felt so excruciatingly uncomfortable, like I was hanging from the monkey bars and my underwear was showing. Like it was just like, this is so awful to recognize myself in this way. Because we know Kim brought up the ego aspect and that balance of like, we're not here to kill or eradicate the ego, but the ego definitely doesn't want us to be with, let alone be okay with, our true essence. Our ego wants us to keep believing that there is something inherently wrong with us because that's the perception that will keep us safe, is one way of looking at it.
Yeah, it was gluttony that got me. So I looked around I looked around and said, oh wait, who saw that? It's like
It's,
that.
I mean, it's a great point about shadow work, right? It's so funny. I didn't relate to you when you just said that, Jeannie, but I think that's because when I did DISC, when I was working in the corporate world and we did DISC and I came out as a D dominant, I was humiliated in my career. I was like, oh my God, I felt so called out for being so pitta essentially, but so awful. I experienced that in the corporate setting, and I've done a lot of inner work on my fire. And so I think when I found Enneagram after all of my shadow work, I'm like, yep, that's me. Right? But you don't feel that way if there's maybe parts of ourselves that we haven't really come to terms yet.
And along those lines, it can be really helpful if there's someone who knows you really well. Like that happened to me. Someone who knew me really well walked in while I was listening to Jaya's videos about the Enneagram types and happened to walk in on Enneagram type 7 and was listening to the description and turned to me and was like, that is exactly you. Everything that was just said is exactly you. So I think that we all have our biases about ourselves and the ways in which we view ourselves and the ways in which we've conditioned to behave or not behave, or the ways in which we think we're right or we're wrong. So sometimes just having someone who knows you really well, also just listening to the types to be like, oh no, actually, those are your traits. Those are your personalities. That is how you act, can also just be validating in terms of helping define which might be your type. I did also.
I love that what Kim just said is the emphasis on integrating and doing shadow work and being able to, bring those aspects of yourself that you maybe have conditioned out of awareness, or you have suppressed, or you have extinguished in some kind of way, at least in a social aspect. Because I haven't actually found that to be true, that method that I mentioned to be true about eights. What I have found to be true about eights is they're like, I don't do Enneagram. I've seen it, like my aunt immediately. I was like, do the test. And like we were with the whole family and we're doing the test. And my aunt, I was like, did you take the test? I just texted it to you. And she's like, I'm not doing that. I don't believe in that. I don't do Enneagram. And I was like, oh, and instantly I was like, oh, you're an 8. You're totally an 8. And so her sister, my other aunt, went through and answered all the questions. And she's like, fine, I'm going to be you. I'm going to be you. And I'm going to answer the questions as you then. And my aunt Desi was like, you can do whatever you want. I'm not going to listen to it. And then so it came out as an 8. And then immediately Desi showed up and would do the test. But I've heard that as opposed to 8s finding a resistance to their type, they find a resistance to the system.
Can I talk to that?
Yeah.
Because I think like I haven't been able to even get my head around Enneagram because I live from my body. I think I'm a body type, right? And I do wonder if it's like there's this mental body thing that you're putting on me. I wonder if the 8 has that resistance, or I can't even get my head around it. Whereas dosha typing feels really natural for me because I can feel into it, or it feels more like it comes from a body understanding. And so I can get that. So I just want to place that piece in, although like, don't define me. Like I could see defiance being that, but I wonder if it's defiance or like going from the head, going from the mental body in doesn't feel natural versus the body out.
But
So
you're also talking as a healthy 8, Kim, because,
Right.
like an unhealthy 8 or not as far along on the path is because like, you don't know me. And, the
I
8
know
gets
me.
Yeah. And the eight just gets to be the boss, the alpha of everything. And I just want to, because I'm fascinated by gender, Jeannie had pointed out, and it used to be, we've improved, that women and cisgendered women, and if they took the test, way too many of them came out as threes because there was so much social expectation to be that nurturing, motherly, loving way of being. But so eight it does the opposite. It's like for women, people identified as women, it's eight doesn't fit. You're not supposed to, you're not allowed, and obviously that's getting better too, but it's the one that it's really uncomfortable sometimes for a woman to be typed as an eight. It's like, wait, I'm not supposed to be that mask. But yeah.
Yeah. And eights also, when they're in their stress and they're not integrated, that's mental body, that they go into the mental body, they go into five. And so it's like they want to know. And if it's a new system that they have not been previously exposed to, it's like, well, I don't know anything about this. This is totally outside of my purview, of my scope, of my comfort zone. So there's a lot of elements that, we could look at from that perspective of how we perceive ourselves and how the world perceives us, and where those things integrate really well and where it feels excruciatingly uncomfortable. I hated being a nine, hated it. I never wanted to tell anybody I was a nine. Like, I was like, I'll just lie and say I'm a four or a two. Like, I'm a four, Anybody who actually knew me would be like, you're not. And but I was so uncomfortable with it because the way that I interpreted reading about my type initially was as a doormat. I'm like, God, I'm a wet noodle ass doormat, can't stand up for myself, no fire, let's be the mediator and the peacemaker. Like, I was a conflict resolution buddy in middle school. Like, that was I had a little sash I wore on the playground, and I wandered around to like help people not be in conflict with each other. And yet I was so resistant to being a nine, and it sounded just bleh to me. For just an added perspective of how we don't always enjoy being. Why was that a thing? Because Ithaca. That's why that was a thing in middle school. Because Ithaca. We're going to have conflict resolution buddies. No drama on the playground.
Kim, I want to respond to your the fact that you said you can't feel the Enneagram, because the thing that brought it alive for me was the book, The Nine Gateways to Presence. Each one of the types has a different way of embodying, a different experience of embodiment of that type, which is the energy of the gift of the type, and especially in this expression of the holy idea. And then there are all these intermittent states that we use yoga to try to traverse the Enneagram to get from wherever imbalance we have up to our higher self. In fact, I I visualize the Enneagram as a three-dimensional. It's like these 9 levels of health that you can go up, and that it narrows as you go up, because we have access to all of them. Like, if you make it to the top, you've made it to the elder council of the Enneagram. That's the escape room game reward. You get to be an elder council. But once you're at a higher point where it's closer together, you have access to the energy of all the other points, which is attention or love or presence or feeling or thinking, so it's different, but there is a feeling associated. So when I heard you say that in class, I thought, oh, that's the opportunity. Help everybody feel what it feels like to feel into the embodiment of each one of the points. There is feeling, for me, there is. I can sense that. That's what made it come alive.
I just want to bring everyone's attention to Jennifer's question in the chat. She wrote, what might be an average length of time that someone could be in their growth or stress point? Do people go there for days, months, years? Is there any clear answer to that, Jaya, Michelle?
I would.
I personally think the answer is years. That you can be. I mean, I perceive myself as being stuck on my particular journey in life. So that's my experience, that you can be stuck in different points. You know, I think it's not being stuck in the same point like every 24 hours for years, but a tendency, tamasic, being in a place of stuckness in a fear point where you haven't come up with the answer for how to navigate your way out of it.
A lot of mistyping can come from that I've done that before in coaching, you know, that I see someone presenting at a certain point and it turns out to be their stress point. As we keep working together, it becomes clear that's not their core type. So that's interesting, but it can vary tremendously. It's all over the map how, you know, it could be, you could be there very briefly. And if you're self-witnessing, you can be there really briefly because you watch yourself. Oh, my kid and I just say it. I have a 4 child, and if either of us sounds even remotely like a 2, which is the stress point, you know, if there's any resentment or like I did blah 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 for so and so, it's like we laugh and we say, we call it out, and it's like, okay, let's move away from that, shall we? Yeah.
And it looks like people are also curious in the chat what the other animals. Kim started an animal train on this. I can't go to real life animals because all I see is Winnie the Pooh's and like 100 Acre Wood. So I'm like, well, duh, 6 is Piglet. But I can't, it's like, oh, but 6 isn't like a pig. So my brain doesn't go to, shocker, real animals. It goes to fantasy animals in the 100 Acre Wood. So yeah, Kim, I don't know if you can go
I would
specifically.
need to spend more time with some of these because I'm unfamiliar, I think, with the head types. I think those are the ones where I'm like still trying to get my head around the head types. So I'm not sure I can speak to that yet. But I think I did share. I'll type in the chat if anything comes to me by the end of class.
I did also want to bring awareness to Rachel's question, which was a little bit while ago. Can 4s also have Pitta energy? And so, all similar to how all the Enneagram types can be found in all of us, all of the doshas, all of the elements can be found in all of us. Each one of us has our own unique composition of each of these elements, and so the amount or that it shows up for you will be different depending on what is going to best serve you at that time and what you've been working on and what you've been cultivating. But just to remember, even though we've been talking about maybe which doshas or which elements tend to predominantly show up or predominantly go out of balance or predominantly need to be brought into awareness for each of the Enneagram types, all of them have all the doshas, all of them have all the elements, and just as we all have all of the Enneagram types within us.
Yeah, and I think for 4s, it's important to remember, like we've been spending a lot of time in spiritual warrior, we've been spending a lot of time looking at that stress and growth and how we move people from whatever to wherever in regards to private sessions or in regards to yoga classes. And the 4, when it is in its growth, it goes to 1. And it does have access to a different elemental experience when it's in its 1 as well. So we talked about 1s, you know, having that pitta energy. We talked about really the 1s having a variety of elements that are present within it, depending on the balance and what's going on. So, you know, when we think about the 4 moving to its growth, the 4 is, I would see the 4 as exhibiting, you know, really solid mental fire when it goes there and being able to focus on things and to get things done and kind of step out of the heart feelingness and into the embodied pitta or heat tapas to move forward. Monica's asking in the chat, I'm very confused between the 8 and the 3. Most of what I wrote was similar. Is there any radical difference? Maybe 8 is pure pitta and 3 is mixed with vata. 8 and 3 are 2 types that often people swap as their as how they identify too. Jaya, Michelle, do either of you want to?
I think motivation is key here, like what drives you, because the 8 is after experience and making things happen, and they're vital. Like, it's very important to them to be at the top. 3 wants to be the best. They want to win the prize. They want to get the mention. They want credit. They want they want to be standing in the at the Academy Awards, getting the Oscar, and just dressed to the nines, where they're the one who gets written up for the best outfit. But so eight wants to be the boss. They're really just the top, and they have a lust for life and for getting things done. 3, it's not about that. It's about so it's less embodied than the eights. It's really about they need to prove their worth through achievement, and that secretly they fear that they're empty and that they're not enough, and so they're going to constantly prove that they're enough. But they want to be the winner and they want to look polished. They don't necessarily, they could be a boss, but they don't necessarily want to be at the top. And they care very much what others think of them, or care especially what certain people who have certain status or whatever think of them. Whereas the 8 kind of doesn't give a fuck. The 8 is just, they're just going to do what they do and be who they are. And it's okay if you don't like me. I don't mind being unpopular. I'm going to do me, and I'm on top.
I always think about it in regards to sports ball because you know how I like to stretch my brain and think about sports balls. Um, in sports ball, the 3 is like the MVP, right? The 3 is like the star player on the team that gets the front page news, that gets right. Whereas the 8 is either the coach or the manager.
Owner of the team.
Yeah, the coach, like the coach is maybe even directing that 3 how to be out in the world to best fit that archetype. But that 3 is not necessarily in charge of anything, and if they are, that's not their motivation, like Jaya said. So I think about it like that. Or in like art, in art or creative expression, the 3 is the star of the play and the 8 is the director. So like they have these like leadership roles, and they can take charge, and it's a different motive.
But maybe don't want the responsibility.
No.
The 3. And that's what, so in corporate life, for example, a 3 might want to rise to the top because that's the place to go. But then when they get there, the level of responsibility and the fear of failure can crumble them. They'd prefer top cover, so to speak, so that they're not as exposed and vulnerable, I think.
Totally.
I would also say energetically they're different. 8 is denser energy. 3 is wispier, more flowing energy.
Yeah, and I've seen 3s, like Kim was just saying, climb that corporate ladder and then very rapidly abandon ship because they've achieved it. Like they did the thing that they set out to do, and that was to be at the top, and to get the proverbial nameplate on their door or on their desk, right? And then it was like, oh, well, now I got to go do that someplace else, right? Like,
or validation. Like it
Yeah.
may not be for nameplate. It might just to be validated that they are worthy.
But they wouldn't say that. Yeah.
They would be more entitled.
Yeah.
Whereas
Maybe I'm thinking of a more evolved 3. I know of a 3 who may be more evolved, and it's not just for the attention, but it's for a sense of self-worth because of the deep level of unworthiness. Jaya, you're nodding. Is that what's going on with that 3?
The 3 is always looking for that, but they're not necessarily aware they're looking for that. But they what they want is that mirror that lets them know basically they're afraid they're not worthwhile. So they want constant reminders through the wins, through the awards, through the credit given, the mentions, the all of it, that, yeah, oh, yes, you are worthwhile. Yes, you are. And if too much silence goes by between those, they're going to get really fucking nervous. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Where I mean, my experience with 8s, particular because I get to work with one every single day, very, very close, doing lots of things. it's not a question that they know what needs to be done and how to do it. Like the running joke in our organization is like, well, Jessica can't actually be in charge of everything in the world. So like we say that frequently just in staff meetings, and right, it's like, well, this thing didn't go the way that we thought it was. Well, Jessica wasn't in charge of that, like, and we mean like because we went out to lunch and it took too long, right? Like, well, Jessica doesn't run that restaurant, okay? So what could we so we play in that vernacular because it's almost like, well, obviously I could be in charge of this and I could run this if it was my choice to do that. The recognition is almost neither here nor there. And Kim, you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm making a generalization. um the ways that eights feel accomplishment in regards to how different it is from a three. Threes can really thrive off of words of affirmation, whereas eights are like, don't tell me that I'm doing a great job. Show me that you appreciate what I'm doing, and do that by doing what I told you to do and what your job is. Right? It's more of like, I don't actually need words. I need actions to be behind the words, and that will show me that you see how much effort I'm putting in because you're meeting me where I need you to meet me to a degree.
Yeah, that sounds right. Honestly, I have to go back 20 years ago, because once this gets worked, and like the motivation is definitely on the results, and the blah, blah, blah around the result is just blah, 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 until you develop the heart and the interpersonal piece of it. And once the interpersonal piece and the heart and the sacral are developed, that becomes equally important. But still, validation and words, I would say what you said is absolutely correct, are less meaningful as action and physical realm implementation and execution.
I'll say one other thing about eights. My brother is an eight. And something that I've noticed a lot is that they're very directed. They don't have a lot of people struggle with, should I make this action or should I do this? Is this going to be the right choice? Is this going to be the right choice? And eights don't have that. They know exactly what they want to do and they know exactly which is going to be the right choice for them. And they don't need to explain it to anybody. It's not like, should I go to this restaurant or should I go to that restaurant? They're like, no, I'm going to this restaurant and that's the end. That's the end of the decision. Should we go here or should we leave the park now or should we leave, in 15 minutes? No, we're leaving now because that's the right decision. So, eights really don't struggle with a lot of like indecision or anxiety around decisions or, what should I do next? They have that discernment, that fire energy that really tells them that this is the next best step.
Yeah, they know their truth. And so the truth comes from deep within. Whereas threes are looking, I think, to other people for their truth. There's a little bit more of an externalization for Monica, who's looking at the three versus the eight. I think there's more of an externalized sense of self for the three, to correct me if I'm wrong, whereas the eight, like, don't need nobody to tell them because they know.
Message that they were valued for what they did rather than who they were, and overemphasized. And the eight had to grow up early and take responsibility too early. So inside of that fierce exterior of the eight is also a very youthful, warm, fuzzy, back to sort of the innocence of childhood, almost kind of a closeness, warmth whereas the three doesn't necessarily know what's there. The three has kind of suffers from kind of an empty of a not knowing, of not being in touch. What the mudra for the three is to put the Gyan mudra, the Enneagram mudra for the three is to have both hands rested on the knees, that basically bring the attention back to the heart, so that the three can come in contact with the light of the heart that's there, the essence of the heart space.
There's a specific question in the chat for Sabrina. I don't know. Sabrina, are you still here, babe? Asking which Enneagram type you are. Sabrina. Maybe she's not here anymore.
Hey there, I'm driving. What Enneagram does everyone think I am?
Oh.
Jai is like, no, don't do that. I don't see any phases right now, but I'm making assumptions. We have
Eight?
an
You're
8.
gonna guess 8. We got a guess for 8. We got a guess for 2.
Okay.
Anyone else making guesses? Anyone else typing Sabrina in full rule breaking?
Type me in all the rule breaking.
We got 7. We got 3.
Oh, I love it. I'd just be all of them.
We're all over. 6 for kicks. 2. Got another vote for 2.
See, it's fun. It could be fun.
We're gonna do a Zoom poll in a second.
Lauren says 2 for sure. So yeah, I'm a 2. I go to a 4 in growth. I definitely recognize that. There was a long time when I thought I was a 4 because, I wanted to be a 4. Everyone wants to be a 4. And yeah, so it makes sense to me that I go to a 4 in growth. I see that within myself, and I see myself going to an 8 in stress, and I am happy that I'm able to recognize that. If I'm feeling it, the whole house doesn't have to feel it. It's okay. So yeah, you're welcome to. I'm gonna mute, but you're welcome to elaborate on that if you wish, Jeannie.
I'm excited that that you just demonstrated how the growth and stress lines can help us type ourselves and really get very clear about whether we're at the right type or not. So thank you for that, Sabrina.
Yeah, and I just want to say, there's a lot of systems out there, and the systems only go as far as you're willing to engage in them in a practical, bring it into your day-to-day life type of way. Like, it doesn't work to be like, well, 4 is gonna 4, and that's just how I am, or like Vata's gonna Vata, and I don't have any control over this. Like, that's just who I am. And I think everybody on this call knows this, and it's worth just mentioning again that we seek these systems to have empowerment around how we can feel fulfilled in life and how we can feel balanced and not get hijacked by habits and tendencies, and instead feel like we have some agency and we have some choice, and we can direct our life. And my shameless plug is in 3 minutes. We're gonna hop Zooms, and I'm gonna go live with a graduate of Yoga Farm who does human design, which is a whole other layer that can be added on top of all of these things. And again, it's like knowing your human design type is only as good as if you're willing to live in the space of, I can stretch to my discomfort, I can notice when I go default to stress, like all those aspects we have to be able to use them, and use them also in our workplace too. If you know everybody's type, that doesn't really do anything if you're not really bringing awareness and practice into someone's type.
I'd be so curious to see human design against Enneagram against doshas, to be honest.
I know.
Oh my God.
It's a wild ride.
Because I'm a manifesting generator, right? Of course, I'm an Aries manifesting generator.
Mm-hmm. Can I answer the question that came in about wings? When do we go to our wings? You don't go to your wings. Wings are like the flavor of your type. You might demonstrate your wing more sometimes, but it's just, think of it like if you're a burrito, like let's say 4 is the burrito. Well, there's a like maybe a vegan burrito that's like mild with green sauce, and there's a spicy burrito with red sauce, and it's just going to look different depending on which is your wing. So I've always liked getting credit. I've always been out in the world a little bit more about stuff with the more predominant 3 wing as a 4. And then I have a friend who's a 4 who's deeply hermetic, and it can be harder for them to get their art out. She is an artist. But so the flavoring of the wing is basically how that works, and that's ongoing. It's not, you don't. Yeah.
I love that.
I'd like to add one thing very important. We're not our type. The Enneagram doesn't tell us what our type is. It doesn't put us in a box. It tells us the box we're already in and how to get out of it. That's the point. It's like, how do we use our gift, overuse our gift to wrap ourselves around, and how do we get out of that so we have access to all of it?
Anyways, thank you everybody so much for being here. I do want to respect, as Jeannie said, she has a human design interview next. So thank you everyone for being here, for your participation, to all the panelists for making time to be here today to talk about Ayurveda and the Enneagram and the chakras and everybody's questions. And this was so much fun. This was so much fun for me. And I really hope it was a lot of fun for you. I just loved the discussion and just all the ideas that were flowing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Supriya, for this brilliant idea. In your 7 Vataness, one of the things I love the most is that you have infused such new ways of exploring these concepts within the spiritual warrior program, and it has felt like this breath of inspiration having you on the team. So I so appreciate how that shows up and how it aligns with your 7 and Vata aspects. So thanks, love.
Everybody, have a great rest of your day.